Meghan is a white woman because she was white for most of her life. She simply decided to embrace the little bit of Afro heritage that she had when it became convenient. But before that, she passed as white. And she's, by her own admission, has never experienced prejudice.
That is not merely a provocative statement. It is a precise clinical dissection of one of the most successful corporate rebrands in modern celebrity history. To understand the psychological architecture of Meghan Markle, one must look entirely at the timeline of utility. For decades, as she navigated the cutthroat corridors of Hollywood audition rooms, her heritage was treated as a footnote, an ambiguity, or completely unmentioned. Her headshots, her social circles, and her self-identification reflected a woman moving seamlessly through white elite spaces without a whisper of systemic oppression. By her own public admissions prior to entering the royal family, race was not the lens through which she viewed her struggles or her triumphs. But the moment the royal fairy tale began to fracture under the weight of institutional scrutiny and her own inability to adapt to a life of public service, an asset acquisition occurred. The sudden, theatrical unveiling of her 43% Nigerian heritage on her podcast was not a profound spiritual journey of self-discovery. It was a tactical deployment. It was an identity manufactured in a PR laboratory, weaponized at the exact moment she needed an impenetrable shield against criticism. The strategy was as brilliant as it was cynical.
When I had done the genealogy and found out about my heritage, the first thing I did obviously was call my mom because I wanted to know if she had any awareness of it. And I think being African American, part of it is really not knowing so much about your lineage, your background, where you come from specifically.
By rewriting her own history and casting herself as a newly awakened avatar of West African heritage, she effectively insulated herself from accountability. Any critique of her work ethic, any questioning of her financial motives, and any pushback from Buckingham Palace could instantly be reframed as an act of institutional racism. Her heritage wasn't found. It was weaponized to launch a calculated, scorched earth campaign against the British monarchy.
It's unbelievable how she created this whole racial firestorm for the royal family. She sat with Oprah. She clearly injected the issue of race.
The American Black experience is entirely different from the Caribbean Black experience or the African experience. So they are two ignoramuses who have opportunistically played the race card so that they could make money on the back of being victims.
Lady Colin Campbell hits on a profound psychological truth that mainstream commentators are often too terrified to articulate: the concept of identity shopping. The authentic American Black experience is forged in generations of systemic struggle, cultural resilience, and deeply lived reality. It is not a designer coat that you leave in the closet for 40 years and only put on when the weather turns cold. Meghan Markle lived a life of immense privilege, private schooling, and Hollywood luxury, wholly detached from the systemic hardships she now claims to champion. By superimposing a narrative of racial victimization onto her corporate disputes with the palace, she engaged in a deeply cynical form of cultural appropriation. She didn't want to carry the weight of the community. She wanted to use the community's historical pain as a transactional currency to secure global sympathy and multi-million-dollar media contracts. This identity shopping allowed the Sussexes to transform the House of Windsor into an ideological battleground. They created a rhetorical trap for the royal family. If the palace attempted to correct the record regarding bullying allegations or internal disputes, they were painted as institutional oppressors. If they remained silent, their silence was weaponized as an admission of guilt. This was a psychological masterstroke designed to grant the Sussexes total moral immunity while they monetized their grievances on Netflix and Spotify.
Problem for Meghan and Harry is they've got nothing to offer other than their victimhood and the story they've now told.
However, an operation of this magnitude, one that seeks to take on a 1,000-year-old institution, cannot be run by two disgruntled ex-royals sitting in a Montecito mansion. It requires infrastructure. It requires an aggressive, highly coordinated apparatus designed to enforce a singular narrative, silence dissenting journalists, and manufacture international incidents. This is not a family feud. It is a corporate entity built for ideological warfare. Welcome to the inner workings of what insiders call the Sussex War Machine.
And why did he somersault? Because he was under pressure from Meghan. And Meghan, when she puts on pressure with all her lawyers and all the rest of it, is a terrifying machine. I mean, it's what you call the Sussex War Machine.
Tom Bower's assessment reveals the terrifying psychological asymmetry at the heart of the Sussex marriage. Prince Harry's total capitulation, his dramatic somersault from a proud British military veteran and working royal to an international critic of his own homeland, is the direct result of a relentless, corporate-grade psychological pressure. The Sussex War Machine is not just a collection of publicists. It is a sophisticated apparatus of high-stakes lawyers, crisis managers, and digital operatives who operate with a single directive: protect the brand, destroy the opposition, and enforce the narrative of victimhood at all costs. But a war machine cannot function in a vacuum. It requires an active theater of operations to justify its existence. By 2024, the Montecito pity party was losing its market value. The American public was growing weary of the endless complaining. The ratings were cratering, and the A-list doors in Hollywood were quietly shutting. To revive the brand and validate the racist royal narrative they had sold to the highest bidder, they needed a physical stage. They needed to prove that while they were rejected by the palace, they were worshipped by the world. This desperation directly birthed the May 2024 tour of Nigeria. The sheer psychological absurdity of this trip cannot be overstated. Here are two individuals who spent years using global media platforms to dismantle the British monarchy, publicly trashing its protocols as archaic, colonialist, and fundamentally toxic. Yet, the moment their plane touched down in Abuja, what did they demand? The exact same archaic protocols they claimed to despise. They demanded red carpets. They demanded military salutes. They demanded the staging of a mock state visit, complete with the inspection of troops and royal-style receptions. It was a bizarre, Twilight Zone performance of synthetic majesty. They uncoupled the immense privileges of royalty from its heavy burdens of duty and lifelong public service, extracting the aesthetic authority of the crown while continuing to stab the institution in the back.
Reporting and claims, particularly that were from Tom Bower's book. The visit had all the elements of an official royal tour, with a formal welcome meeting with officials, cultural engagements, and carefully staged appearances. It was all done in a way to give the illusion of royalty, with a behind-the-curtain backstabbing of the British royals.
The illusion of royalty staged in Nigeria was a masterclass in psychological projection and breathtaking hypocrisy. Let us not forget the foundational premise of Megxit. The world was told, by tearful documentary close-ups and dramatic press releases, that Harry and Meghan were fleeing the United Kingdom in a desperate quest for privacy. They claimed the relentless media circus, the flashbulbs, and the public scrutiny were actively destroying their mental health. Yet, fast forward to Nigeria, and we witnessed the Sussexes deliberately manufacturing the exact same media circus they claimed traumatized them. They didn't want privacy from the cameras. They wanted absolute editorial control over the lenses. They fled the scrutiny of an independent British press corps, only to fly across the world and surround themselves with a hand-picked, heavily curated media entourage designed to capture every practiced smile and rehearsed embrace. To pull off this visual propaganda, they deployed their ultimate weapon, Mr. Harriman. Harriman is not just a photographer. He is the chief visual architect of the Sussex mythos. His assignment in Nigeria was not to document reality, but to construct a parallel universe. Every photograph was meticulously framed to send a dual message. To the public, It screamed, "Look how beloved we are. Look how regal we remain." To Buckingham Palace, it was a direct mocking threat. We do not need the king's permission, nor his blessing, to act like monarchs on the global stage. It was an entirely synthetic majesty, a theatrical production masquerading as international diplomacy, staged exclusively to keep the Sussex brand relevant and monetizable for their American corporate benefactors.
Harry has no knowledge of any significance about the Commonwealth, none whatsoever. Meghan has even less, so she has less than none. Meghan is a white woman because she was white for most of her life. She simply decided to embrace the little bit of Afro heritage that she had when it became convenient.
Lady Colin Campbell exposes the profound intellectual and historical vacuum that sits at the center of this entire enterprise. Prince Harry and Meghan Markle's understanding of the Commonwealth is not just superficial, it is aggressively performative. The Commonwealth is a complex, nuanced association of 56 independent, sovereign nations, bound by shared values, historical ties, and deep geopolitical cooperation. It represents a delicate tapestry of cultures working through immense modern challenges. It is not an exotic backdrop for a Hollywood couple's lifestyle rebrand. By treating a sovereign African nation as a convenient stage to validate a DNA test result, the Sussexes committed the ultimate act of modern cultural exploitation. They reduced a rich, distinct, and historic culture down to a mere PR prop for American morning television. They did not visit Nigeria to listen, to learn, or to serve the local communities. They visited Nigeria so that the Nigerian people could serve as extras in their ongoing reality show. It was a deep insult to the Commonwealth nations they claimed to champion, proving that to the Sussex War Machine, even global diplomacy is subordinate to the preservation of their personal brand.
Controversial part of this story centers around what was allegedly said during a private dinner in Nigeria. According to Tom Bower, Meghan shared her account of a moment during her pregnancy when she claims that two senior royals questioned the potential skin color of her unborn child.
This is where the mask slips entirely, revealing that what the public witnesses on television is only a fraction of a highly coordinated geopolitical campaign. If we accept Tom Bower's reporting, we are no longer looking at a family rift or a therapeutic venting session between estranged relatives. We're looking at something far more severe, deliberate, state-level diplomatic sabotage. Consider the setting. This was not a private counseling room in California. This was a high-level dinner attended by influential political figures and military generals in Nigeria, a powerhouse of the African continent and a cornerstone of the Commonwealth. For Meghan to allegedly resurrect the highly volatile royal skin color allegation in this specific room is a calculated act of soft power warfare. It was a direct attempt to poison the well of international relations, weaponizing historical colonial grievances to systematically turn African leaders against King Charles and the British state. The psychological mechanics at play here are deeply manipulative. By taking an unverified, highly disputed private conversation from behind palace walls and inserting it into a diplomatic setting, she was framing the British monarchy not as a partner in global development, but as an active, unrepentant oppressor. This is the classic playbook of the Sussex War Machine. They do not seek to build or reform. They seek to dismantle. To do this at a time when the king was navigating his own serious health battles and when the Commonwealth was looking for stability speaks to a breathtaking level of cold, clinical opportunism. It is no longer about her truth. It is about global leverage.
So Harry and Meghan's influence was in terms of setting off the race baiting. And
the ultimate legacy of the Sussexes campaign is not progress, but division. By turning the British monarchy into a racial boogeyman, they managed to sustain their media relevance and secure short-term commercial viability. But look at the profound, systemic hypocrisy that anchors this entire brand. The very institution they publicly paint as a bastion of unconscious bias, colonial cruelty, and cold indifference is the exact same institution from which they extract every ounce of their social and commercial credibility. If the House of Windsor is as toxic and oppressive as they claim in their Netflix documentaries, the only logically consistent moral action would be to sever all ties. They should voluntarily renounce their royal titles, drop the Duke and Duchess styling, and stand entirely on their own names. Instead, they cling to those titles like a lifeline. Why? Because they know that without the royal prefix, they are simply another pair of wealthy California influencers competing for space in a saturated market. It is an exhausting, circular game of psychological projection that has ultimately alienated the global public. The Lilibet domain registration scandal is perhaps the most revealing window we have into the cold, transactional calculus of the Sussex brand. Lilibet was not just a family nickname. It was an incredibly intimate, deeply personal moniker born out of a young Princess Elizabeth's inability to pronounce her own name. It was a name used exclusively by her parents, her sister Margaret, her husband Prince Philip, and a tiny circle of her closest, lifelong confidants. It was a sacred piece of her private identity. To have that deeply personal name trademarked and registered as a commercial.com domain by her grandson's lawyers, allegedly before the Queen had even been properly asked for her permission, is a level of emotional piracy that defies belief.
Who told you the truth? And of course, then Harry had to withdraw because it wasn't the truth. So you go back to the beginning and say, when they gave her that name and the whole registration, everything, this was pure commercialization. I'm sure inspired by Meghan, because Harry hasn't got a commercial strand in his body, wouldn't understand it all.
It tells you everything you need to know about the Sussex playbook. Target a sacred asset. Identify a symbol of immense emotional and institutional value. Appropriate and trademark. Lay legal claim to the name for future commercial branding. Monetize and protect. Treat a grandmother's personal history as a brand asset. This is the exact same strategy we saw deployed with the 43% Nigerian claim. In both instances, we witness a clinical process of asset stripping. An identity is claimed, trademarked, packaged, and monetized, while the profound emotional damage to the living, breathing human beings involved is dismissed as mere collateral damage. It is a corporate takeover of heritage, executed with the ruthless efficiency of a Silicon Valley startup. The rapid, downward trajectory of their public standing is a study in sociological gravity. In May 2024, they were riding high on the full royal red carpets of Abuja, surrounded by military escorts and international headlines. Yet, look how quickly the high-altitude glamour evaporates when they return to the cold reality of California. The Hollywood elite are, above all else, survivalists. They can sniff out social and financial toxicity from miles away. The industry has quietly, yet decisively, closed its doors. Industry giants like Kevin Costner, Oprah Winfrey, and Tyler Perry have realized that associating with the Sussexes carries a massive reputational tax. They are seen as litigious, unpredictable, and entirely devoid of the cultural capital they once boasted. Consequently, we now see the Duchess of Sussex reduced to crashing local charity fundraisers and posing for photos at regional events, desperately chasing the flashbulbs she once claimed to flee. The grand illusion of global influence has collapsed back into a frantic, localized hustle for basic relevance.
Meghan never intended to be a dutiful duchess opening hospitals in Shropshire. She always intended to go back to Hollywood and use her title to pursue her career, and persuaded Harry, as I showed in this book, and they could only find happiness in California.
When you step back and look at the entire arc of this saga, the sheer scale of the strategic miscalculation becomes breathtaking. What began as a convenient 43% DNA claim whispered into a podcast microphone was never a genuine journey of ancestral discovery. It was the architectural foundation for a high-stakes, geopolitical maneuver. The DNA claim was the moral license used to justify the May 2024 full royal tour of Nigeria, a trip meticulously designed to mimic the majestic, state-level operations of the crown while actively seeking to undermine its international standing. It was a Trojan horse. Under the guise of a celebratory cultural homecoming, the Sussexes ran a calculated campaign of soft power sabotage. But this grand strategy reveals the fatal flaw in Meghan Markle's psychological makeup. She is essentially a mid-tier Hollywood PR operative who fundamentally miscalculated her target. She treated a 1,000-year-old constitutional monarchy like a Hollywood studio that could be bullied, gaslit, and outmaneuvered by tabloid leaks, high-priced lawyers, and weaponized identity politics. She believed that by capturing the digital media narrative, she could force the palace to capitulate and grant her the half-in, half-out royal status she desperately craved. But the palace plays in centuries. Meghan plays in daily clicks. While she was celebrating short-term PR victories, the crown simply relied on its historic, quiet resilience, leaving her to slowly drown in her own media circus. And what of Prince Harry? He remains the ultimate collateral damage of this entire corporate campaign. Harry traded the quiet, enduring dignity of a real prince for the cheap, fleeting spotlight of an American influencer. He has sacrificed his heritage, his country, and his family to serve as the secondary asset for a war machine that is running completely out of ammunition. The tragedy is that he may only realize the scale of his loss when the cameras finally turn away for good. The warnings have been issued, the political chess pieces have been played, and the clock is finally ticking down.
They went there, and undoubtedly at the beginning it was absolutely brilliant, and they earned a lot of money, but they have now reached the point at which the price of betrayal of the royal family is, as I say, the endgame, which is not rosy for them.
The Sussex brand is officially out of ammo. The victim narrative has dried up, the A-list doors in Hollywood are firmly locked, and the full royal illusions have been exposed as hollow, transactional theater. The web is closing.
Their existence is a threat to the British royal family because they can only survive by damaging the royal family and saying negative things.
Unless Harry wakes up, recognizes the psychological trap he helped construct, and walks away, he will be left standing alone in the wreckage of a brand that destroyed everything it touched.